Hi everybody and welcome back to a new booktube video, and today I am here with a thrifted book haul. So a couple of days ago I went to the thrift store with a friend and we played book bingo, which is really fun. Basically before going in we discussed a couple of books that are almost always in every thrift store. Like in Dutch thrift stores there's a couple of books you will almost always find. For example, Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert is in every thrift store. The same goes for 50 Shades of Grey, and also Donna Tartt's The Secret History is in every thrift store. Like when me and Leonie visited a thrift store, we found like 6 copies in one thrift store. So there's like a couple of books that are almost in every thrift store. So basically we were doing book bingo and having a good time and being like, oh my god, I found one. And then basically, even though I wasn't planning on buying any books, I did buy a ton of books. But this thrift store had a couple of really good books that I'd wanted to read for a really long time, and thrift store prices are so cheap, especially compared to new books. And yeah, then I went a little bit overboard and I bought a bunch of books. This whole tangent was super unnecessary. I could have also just said I bought a bunch of books, but yeah, that's me. I go on tangents and I tell unnecessary stories. Welcome to the channel. Anyway, today I'm going to show you guys every book that I bought and talk about them for a bit, and yeah, that's basically it. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So the first book I picked up at the thrift store is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Now, I love Robin Hobb. She's one of my favourite fantasy authors of all time. Almost all of the books that she's written that I've read so far have just totally grabbed my attention and I just couldn't stop reading them. Like, I'd read them for hours on end and I'd have such a good time. These are fantasy books that I prefer to read in the winter. I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know if there's any logic behind that. I just really enjoy reading these in winter. So far, I've read the Life Ship Traders trilogy. I still have to read the final book in that one. I've also read the Dragonlance trilogy or quartet. I don't know how many books there are, but I did read 4 of them, I think. If there are 4? I don't know. Anyway, I read a bunch of the dragon books that she wrote, and also that's a really long time ago, so that's also why I don't properly remember. And I've read the Fitz and the Fool trilogy as well, which is one of my favourite fantasy trilogies of all time. And that is basically a sequel, and I never knew that, but the main character's dad is the main character in one of Robin Hobb's most famous fantasy series, which is Assassin's Apprentice. Or at least that's how I think it is. It's really difficult to remember for me how all these fantasy worlds are tied in together, because her Life Ship Traders trilogy and her Dragonlance series are sort of intertwined and I think the same world. And then I think this series and The Fitz and the Fool are in the same universe as well. Not the same universe as the other books, but like their own same universe. Am I still making any sense? I feel like I should really get on with it and read this one because I still have not read it. It's really tiny, which is weird because normally all of the Robin Hobb books are absolutely huge bricks of books, but I think this just has really tiny letters, to be honest. Yeah, it has minuscule letters. They're really tiny. So basically in this series we follow young Fitz, who is the bastard son of noble Prince Chivalry. So basically in this one we follow Fitz, who's the bastard son of a noble Prince Chivalry, and basically the series that I love so much, in that one he's the dad. So that's funny. And this is about him and his life. And it says on the back, he's raised in the shadow of the royal court by his father's gruff stableman. He's treated as an outcast by all the royalty, except the devious King Shrewd, who has him secretly tutored in the arts of the assassin. For in Fitz's blood runs the magic skill, and the darker knowledge of a child raised with the stable hounds and rejected by his family. So basically, Fitz is an assassin, and he has some magical powers, I guess. That's all I know about this book. I'm really curious to dive into it, and I'm really excited to have found it at the thrift store for like €1 or something, so that's really exciting. Then the next book that I found had me literally doing a little happy dance at the thrift store, because that is The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince, also by Robin Hobb. And this is a really beautiful edition with sort of bronze foiling on it, and it's so stunning. The inside also has some really pretty opening pages. It has some illustrations in there. This is such a pretty copy, and I'm so excited to have found it at the thrift store for like €3 or something like that. These are some short stories that Robin Hobb has written, and as I said before, I love Robin Hobb's writing, and I had to get this one, especially because short stories in a fantasy setting is something that I usually really enjoy. So yeah, I can't wait to pick this up. Then another book that I found at the thrift store is Kill the Boy Band by Goldie Moldovsky. This is a really weird book that I've heard about a really long time ago. I think like back when I was still on Dutch booktube, not entirely sure, but this is, I think, about a bunch of girls who are such big fans of a boy band and then they kidnap one of their members, but like the ugliest member that none of them actually like. I don't know. I haven't heard of this in a really long time, so I've kind of forgotten what it was all about. But back then, it was like sort of a cult classic, and apparently it's really funny. I think this is sort of supposed to show how the world ridicules fangirls so much, but then also show the craze that comes with fandom, and just a funny, lighthearted read. It says on the back, just because we're fangirls doesn't mean we're crazy. It's important you know that, because everything I'm about to tell you is going to seem... I love living in the city. Because everything I'm about to tell you is going to seem, well, crazy. Anyway, so not entirely sure where this is going to go. It sounds a bit like a Wattpad story. It does sound like a story I could read in an afternoon and just have a really good, fun time. So yeah, this might be a really weird book, but I've wanted to read it for a while, so that's why I picked it up. Then I found Shrill by Lindy West, which is a non-fiction book with feminist essays, and it says on the front, a thrilling, kick-ass, joyous roar of a book. Shrill notes from a loud woman. So I think way back when I was looking for non-fiction to read is when I first came across this one, and I'd read quite a few good reviews of this, saying that it's really funny and it has a lot of critique on modern society and it's really interesting. And I love essay collections, especially feminist ones, and yeah, I thought this would be a nice one to add to the collection. There's still a bunch of feminist non-fiction that I really want to pick up before I pick this one up, to be honest, but I still wanted to get it because it was really cheap. It's a hardcover and it is a book that's been on my list for a while. So let me read a bit of the blurb to you guys. Ferociously witty and outspoken, Lindy West wasn't always this way. She was once a nerdy, terror-stricken mouse girl who wanted nothing more than to be invisible. But fortunately for women everywhere, along the road she found her voice, and how she found it. That cripplingly shy teen grew up to be one of the loudest, shrillest, most fearless feminists on the internet, tirelessly speaking up against the status quo. It just sounds like a lot of feminist books that I've read already, but still, it's one of those books that just goes over really well with me usually. And I've also heard that this book talks about fat phobia for a bit, so I thought that was also nice to learn more about. That is Shrill by Lindy West. And then the final book that I picked up at the thrift store is Special Topics in Calamity Physics by Marisha Pessl. I'm not entirely sure if this is the same author that wrote Night Film, but I do know that this is Marisha Pessl's debut novel, and it is supposedly a mix between Donna Tartt and Hitchcock movies, so that does sound really good. I immediately started in this book. I could not help myself, and so far I've been absolutely adoring it. It's just, I'm gonna put it down for a bit though because it's very heavy. I didn't plan on starting this book, but I just finished my other read and I started in it for a bit just to like grasp a bit what it would be like and read the first couple of pages, and before I knew I was like 30 pages in, then I was 70 pages in, and I just kept going. And so far this has been really intriguing and really funny as well. I didn't expect it to be so funny. Usually with me, when books have really complicated, long-winded writing styles, it takes me a long time to get into them, but this one has huge sentences just like Donna Tartt does, and it's sort of tied to the literature list, so like every chapter is the syllabus for an English student, so that's really cool as well. I feel like I'm all over the place with explaining this book, but basically the long sentences just sort of really sucks me in there, and then before I knew it I was laughing out loud and thinking to myself, this writing is so brilliant, I want to keep on reading it, this is so interesting, and I was just really having a good time overall. So it's about Blue van der Meer and her dad, and they are moving around a lot, and we read about Blue in the present day where she's studying at university, and it's more sort of this dark academia setting, and she's ruminating and looking back on the past, and she's also thinking about this murder or like mystery thing that happened. Somebody's missing, I think. Not entirely sure. Like so far it's a lot of vibes and not a lot of plot has been very obvious to me. I think a suicide happened or maybe a murder, it's not entirely sure, but definitely trigger warning for suicide. All the characters are really interesting. It's quite a character study so far. Everybody's morally grey, they're kind of awful people, but you're still so interested in them and you kind of love them at the same time. They're very intriguing, they're all very flawed characters. Like I said already, we'll read about Blue in the present day, but also when she was a kid, travelling around with her dad and her youth, and the way her mum died, which was really absurd. And her mum had this thing with butterflies, and that's woven into the story really beautifully. And just a lot of the sentences and the writing style is so gorgeous, and like, so far I'm absolutely adoring it, and I'm really happy I picked it up in Dutch, which is my first language, because I feel like I wouldn't have been able to fully grasp this in English. Anyway, really enjoying it so far. I'm really happy I finally picked it up, and also happy I found it at the thrift store because the new hard copy is quite expensive. So I'm really happy I got this. I haven't heard anybody talking about it online, so not sure why. but I'm really interested to keep on reading in it, and I'm really happy that I picked it up. So that was my little thrifted book haul. Let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed this type of book haul. Let me know if you've read any of these books, and if you have any opinions on them, I'd love to know. I always love seeing you guys' comments. And yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely day. Bye!